Welcome to Value Plays Only, where Roguerack is just a great Voltron commander, and nothing else. Today, we have John playing Derevi, Imperial Tactician. This is a creature combo deck looking to use and abuse Derevi's untap ability to make infinite mana with any flicker effect. His hand contains a Mystic Remora, Wild Growth, Utopia Sprawl, Archivist of Ogma, Sowing Microspawn, Smothering Tithe, and City Brass. Dan is playing Zhulodok, Void Gorger. This is a big mana, colorless random number generator. It looks to cast discounted high CMC cards to cascade into a win. It usually wins through a glaring Fleshraker loop. His hand contains a Liquid Metal Torque, Metal Worker, the Endstone, Excalibur, Sword of Eden, Eye of Ugin, City of Traders, and Yavimaya, Cradle of Growth. Albin, from the top deckers, is playing Minsc, Beloved Ranger. His creature combo Naya deck is built to find and sacrifice Protean Hulk. From there, it can assemble a Kiki Jiki or Perforos Whim. His hand contains an Avacyn's Pilgrim, Chrome Mox, Noxious Survival, Underworld Breach, Eladamri's Call, Flooded Strand, and Misty Rainforest. Nick, also from the top deckers, is playing Talion, the Kindly Lord. This is a hard control deck. It looks to grind down its opponents and drown them in card advantage, winning with Thassa's Oracle. His hand contains a Dispel, Mystic Reflection, Chrome Mox, Fellwar Stone, Toxic Deluge, and a Swamp. His Luna Mulligan is a Praetor's Grasp. And with that, let's see some value plays. John starts things off with a City Brass, his land for turn. He takes one to cast Mystic Remora. John passes the turn. Dan plays a Yavimaya, Cradle of Growth, his land for turn. He passes the turn. Albin plays a Flooded Strand, his land for turn. He casts a Chrome Mox. Remora triggers and John draws. Albin imprints a Noxious Revival as it enters. He then pays a life and cracks Flooded Strand, fetching up a Savannah. He casts Deafening Silence. Remora triggers and John draws. He then casts Avacyn's Pilgrim. Albin passes the turn. Nick plays a Swamp as land for turn. He casts a Chrome Mox. Remora triggers and John draws. He imprints Dispel as it enters. Staring at Deafening Silence, Nick passes the turn. John untaps, and in his upkeep, he pays to keep Remora. He plays a Soporific Springs, his land for turn, into play on tap, paying 3 life. John really uses Dan's Yavimaya to its maximum potential as he taps his Springs for a green and casts Utopia Sprawl, enchanting his City Brass Forest. Feeling the power of Mild Ramp, John passes the turn. Dan untaps and draws. He plays a City of Traders, his land for turn. He casts a Metal Worker. A lot of side eyes get thrown at this, but it resolves. Dan then passes the turn. Albin untaps and draws. He plays a Misty Rainforest, his land for turn. He pays a life and cracks it, fetching up a Taiga. He casts his commander, Minsc, Beloved Ranger. It enters and triggers to make a hamster. Albin then passes the turn. Nick untaps and draws. He casts a Fellwar Stone. Remora triggers and John draws. Nick then passes the turn. John untaps, and in his upkeep, he pays to keep Remora. He plays Boseiju, Who Endures, his land for turn. He casts a Wild Growth, enchanting Soporific Springs. John then passes the turn. Dan untaps and draws. He floats 2 mana with City Traders, and then plays Eye of Ugin, his land for turn. City Traders triggers to sacrifice. Dan then taps Metal Worker to show a hand of 5 artifacts, adding 10 more mana. He spends 4 on his commander, Zhulodok, Void Gorger. Everyone debates how bad this is, but ultimately figure he can't do much under Deafening Silence, and it resolves. Dan then casts Ugin, the Spirit Dragon. Cascade, Remora, and all the alarm bells in the building trigger. John draws, and then the table start debating here. They decide to see what the first Cascade hits before acting, and Dan cascades into a glaring Fleshraker, casting it. Somehow with 2 problems, Nick now steps in, casting Force of Will, paying a life and exiling Mystic Reflection as an alternate cost. Remora triggers and John draws. Force counters Ugin, and Fleshraker then resolves. The second Cascade reveals a Krark Clan Ironworks, which Dan can't cast right now. With no more gas this turn, Dan passes the turn. Albin untaps and draws. He takes no game actions and passes the turn. Nick untaps and draws. He casts a Windfall. Remora triggers and John draws. In response, John casts Force of Vigor, exiling Legolas's Quick Reflexes as an alternate cost, targeting Metalworker and Chrome Mox. Everyone then discards their hand and draws 8. Nick then plays a Clearwater Pathways land for turn. He passes the turn. John untaps, and in his upkeep, he lets his Remora die. He plays a Temple Guard in his land for turn, into play on tap, paying 2 life. He casts a Delny, Streetwise Lookout. John then casts his commander, Derevi, Imperial Tactician. It triggers twice through Delny to untap 2 of his lands. He casts a Mox Diamond. In response, Albin casts Swords to Plowshares, targeting Delny. Delny is exiled, and John gains 2 life. He then discards a land as Mox Diamond enters. John casts Delighted Halfling. He then passes the turn. Dan untaps and draws. He plays a Darksteel Citadel as land for turn. He warps Bygone Colossus. Cascade triggers twice, and Fleshraker triggers. Dan makes a Spawn, and then Fleshraker triggers to ping each opponent for 1. The first Cascade reveals the One Ring, casting it. Fleshraker triggers, and Dan makes a Spawn, and then Fleshraker triggers to ping each opponent for 1. In response to the One Ring, John casts Fierce Guardianship, countering the ring. The second Cascade then reveals the Eternity Elevator, which Dan can't cast. Colossus then enters, and Fleshraker triggers to ping each opponent for 1. Dan goes to combat and swings Zhulodok at Nick. He takes the damage, and Dan passes the turn. In his end step, Bygone Colossus exiles himself. Still in the end step, Albin casts Worldly Tutor. In response, Nick steps in with a Swan Song. Tutor is countered, and Albin makes a 2/2 bird. The turn then moves to Albin. Albin untaps and draws. He plays a Plateau as land for turn. He casts Blind Obedience. Albin then passes the turn. In his end step, John casts Eladamri's Call, searching up a Transit Mage to hand. Nick untaps and draws. He plays Polluted Delta as land for turn. He pays Life and cracks it, fetching up an Underground Sea. He casts his commander, Talion the Kindly Lord. Nick names 2 as it enters tapped due to Blind Obedience. Nick then passes the turn. John untaps and draws. He casts Transit Mage. Talion triggers to draw and ping John for 2. It enters and triggers to search up the One Ring to hand. John casts the One Ring. It resolves and enters tapped. It triggers to give John protection from everything. John then goes to combat. He swings Derevi and Halfling at Nick. Nick takes the damage, and Derevi triggers twice to untap the One Ring. John untaps the One Ring, then taps it to draw a card. The second untap then resolves, and John taps it again to draw 2 more. In his second main phase, John plays Gaia's Cradle as land for turn. He taps it to cast Eternal Witness. Talion triggers to draw and ping John for 2. Witness enters and triggers to add Birthing Pod from John's graveyard to his hand. He then passes the turn. Dan untaps and draws. He casts Ultima, Origin of Oblivion. Fleshraker triggers to make a spawn. It triggers again to ping each opponent for 1. Ultima then resolves and Fleshraker pings again. Dan passes the turn. Albin untaps and draws. He plays a Forest as land for turn. He casts Allosaurus Shepherd. John puckers up, looking at the counters that may not matter anymore. Albin then casts Academy Rector. Talion triggers to draw and ping Albin for 2. It resolves, and Albin activates Minsc to make it a 0/0, killing it. Rector triggers to exile itself and search up a Pattern of Rebirth to the battlefield, attached to Boo. He activates Minsc, killing Boo, and the pattern triggers to search up a Protean Hulk to the battlefield. He activates Minsc, killing Hulk, and it triggers to search up a Safi Eric's daughter and Gerard, Weatherlight Hero, to the battlefield. He activates Safi, sacrificing it, targeting Gerard. He then activates Minsc, killing Gerard. Gerard and Safi trigger. Safi returns Gerard to the battlefield, and then Gerard returns all creatures that died this turn, including Protean Hulk and Safi, to the battlefield. Albin now presents a loop of sacrificing Safi for Gerard and Gerard to return all his creatures back, including Safi. Between these, he can use Minsc to kill Protean Hulk, searching up all the creatures from his library with CMC 6 or lower to the battlefield, including Perforos, God of the Forge. Now, when Albin goes through this loop, he continually pings each of his opponents for 2. Using this loop, Nick and Dan die. John has protection from the One Ring and can't die to this loop. Albin puts all of his stack's creatures and the combination of Kiki-Jiki and Felidar Guardian into play. This also includes a Lore into the Third Path that destroys Mox Diamond, and a Skyclave Apparition that exiles the One Ring. He then passes the turn, daring John to try. John untaps, and in his upkeep, Albin sacrifices his Ranger Captain of Eos, locking John out of casting non-creature spells this turn. John looks at his hand, back at the board of instant speed, death, and stacks effects, and concedes. And with that, Albin wins the game. Today, we have a 2-for-1 deal. In this game, Albin is playing Gwendlyn de Courcy. This spicy pile has no relation to its commander. It's a good stuff Grixis core built to prove the 99 can outshine most commanders. It wins with Thassa's Oracle or Underworld Breach. His hand contains a Soul Ring, Vivi Orniteer, Praetor's Grasp, Demonic Consultation, Into the Floodmaw, and Marsh Flats. His London Mulligan is a Cyclonic Rift. Nick is playing Omnath, Locus of Creation. This Sands Black combo deck is looking to use Omnath's landfall ability to make explosive pushes of mana. It can win with Food Chain or Underworld Breach. His hand contains a Badgermole Cub, Neoform, Relic of Legends, Brain Freeze, Cyclonic Rift, Steam Vents, and Bloodstained Mire. John is playing Yuriko, the Tiger Shadow. This deck looks to control the table while flipping big cards off the top for massive damage. His hand contains a May, Scornful Striker, Cursed Totem, Metal Misstep, Chrome Mox, Dark Ritual, Imperial Seal, and Polluted Delta. Dan is again playing Zhulodok, Void Gorger. His hand contains a Mana Vault, Memory Jar, Ugin the Spirit Dragon, Scorched Ruins, Eye of Ugin, and Deserted Temple. His London Mulligan is a Liberator, Urza's Battlethopter. And with that, let's see some value plays. Albin starts things off with a Marsh Flats. He pays life and cracks it, fetching up an Underground Sea. He casts a Soul Ring. Albin passes the turn. Nick plays a Steam Vents, into play tapped. He passes the turn. John plays a Morphic Pool as land for turn. He casts a Dark Ritual. John adds 3 black mana. He spends 2 on a May, Scornful Striker. He then spends his last one on an Imperial Seal. May triggers to ping him for 2. He remarks on the great sequencing as Imp Seal resolves. He searches up a card to the top of his library and loses 2 life. John then passes the turn. Dan plays a Deserted Temple as land for turn. He casts a Mana Vault. May triggers to ping him for 2. Dan passes the turn. Albin untaps and draws. He plays a Command Tower as land for turn. He casts Vivi Orniteer. Albin passes the turn. Nick untaps and draws. He plays a Windswept Teeth as land for turn. He pays life and cracks it, fetching up a Tropical Island. He casts a Badger Mole Cub. It enters and triggers to Earthbend his Steam Vents. Nick passes the turn. John untaps and draws. He plays a Polluted Delta as land for turn. He pays life and cracks it, fetching up an Underground Sea. John goes to combat and swings May at Albin. He looks suspiciously at May and back at Vivi and decides just to take the damage. John then passes the turn. Dan untaps and draws. He plays Eye of Ugin as land for turn. He casts his commander, Zhulodok, Voidgorger. Dan then passes the turn. Albin untaps and draws. He casts Praetor's Grasp, targeting John. Vivi and May trigger. Albin loses 2 and Vivi gets a counter and pings each opponent. He then searches up a card from John's library into exile face down. Albin activates Vivi to add a blue mana and casts Phantasmal Image. It enters as a copy of Badger Mole Cub and triggers to Earthbend his Underground Sea. Albin then passes the turn. Nick untaps and draws. He plays a Bloodstained Mire as land for turn. He pays life and cracks it, fetching up a Plateau. He casts his commander, Omnath, Locus of Creation. In response, John casts an Orcish Bowmasters. It enters and triggers to ping Phantasmal Image. If Image triggers to sacrifice itself. Omnath then enters and triggers to draw a card. Bowmaster triggers to ping Nick's Earthbent land. It dies and triggers to return to play tapped. Nick then passes the turn. John untaps and draws. He casts a Cursed Totem to slow down the table. May triggers to ping him for 2. John then misses a land drop and passes the turn. Dan untaps and draws. Man of All deals 1 to him in his draw step. He plays Scorched Ruins as land for turn, sacrificing his 2 other lands as it enters. Dan passes the turn. Albin untaps and draws. He looks at his board and then at the Cursed Totem. He plays a Badlands as land for turn. Albin goes to combat, swinging his land at Nick. Nick won't put it down and just takes the damage. Albin then casts Into the Floodmaw, targeting Cursed Totem. Vivi and May trigger. Albin loses 2 and Vivi gets a counter and then deals 1 to each opponent. John responds with a Mental Misstep. May triggers to ping him for 2. Into the Floodmaw is then countered. With no other plays, Albin passes the turn. Nick untaps and draws. He plays a Shifting Woodlands as land for turn. He casts a Relic of Legends. May triggers to ping him for 2. Nick then passes the turn. John untaps and draws. He shows Dan a card in hand and asks if Dan will let him in. Dan doesn't want to lose his commander and agrees. John goes to combat and swings his Orc army at Dan. Dan declares no blocks and John activates the Commander Ninjutsu ability of Yuriko, the Tiger Shadow, putting it into play tapped and attacking Dan. Dan takes the damage and Yuriko triggers to reveal a Wonder, with each opponent taking 4. John then passes the turn. Dan untaps and draws. Man of All deals 1 to him. He plays a Cavern of Souls, naming Eldrazi as it enters. Dan casts the Might Stone and the Weak Stone. May triggers to ping him for 2. It enters and triggers to draw 2 cards. Bowmaster triggers twice to ping off the Badger Mole Cub. Dan then casts Torpor Orb. May triggers to ping him for 2. Dan passes the turn. Albin untaps and draws. He takes no game actions and passes the turn. Nick untaps and draws. He casts Rhystic Study. It resolves and Nick passes the turn. John untaps and draws. He asks if anyone will let him in, and no one wants any part of it. John casts Submerge, targeting Omnath. May and Rhystic trigger. Nick draws, and John loses 2 life. Bowmaster triggers to ping Nick for 1. John then goes to combat and swings Yuriko and Mai at Nick. He takes the damage, and Yuriko triggers to reveal Shadow of Mortality, with each opponent taking 15. Everyone gasps for air, as the game has suddenly entered the endgame. In his second main phase, John casts Chrome Mox. May and Rhystic trigger. Nick draws, and John takes 2. Bowmaster triggers to ping Nick for 1. Chrome Mox enters, and John imprints Shadow of Mortality. John then passes the turn. Dan untaps and draws. Man of All triggers to deal 1 to him. He plays the Mycosynth Gardens as land for turn. He casts a Krark Clan Ironworks. Rhystic and May trigger. Dan loses 2 and Nick draws. Bowmaster pings Nick for 1. Dan then sacrifices some of his artifacts to Krark Clan Ironworks to cast Ugin, the Spirit Dragon. Cascade, Mystic and May trigger. Dan loses 2 and Nick draws. Bowmaster pings Dan for 1. The first Cascade resolves and reveals a Soul Ring. Dan opts not to cast it. The second Cascade reveals a Thran Dynamo. Dan casts this one. Rhystic and May trigger. Dan loses 2 and Nick draws. Bowmaster pings Dan for 1. John responds here with a Tainted Pact. Rhystic and May trigger. John loses 2 and Nick declines his draw to make John find an out. John goes exiling through his library until he finds Mindbreak Trap, adding it to hand. John casts Mindbreak Trap, targeting Ugin and Thran Dynamo. Mystic and May trigger. John loses 2 and Nick takes this draw. Bowmaster pings Nick for 1. Dan's spells are exiled and he looks around at the ruins of his board. Dan passes the turn. In his end step, Albin casts Mystical Tutor. Vivi, Rhystic, and May trigger. Albin loses 2. Nick draws, Bowmaster pings Nick for 1, and then Vivi gets a counter and pings each opponent for 1, and Dan dies. Mystical Tutor then resolves, and Albin searches up a Cyclonic Rift to the top of his library. The turn then moves to Albin. Albin untaps and draws. He casts Cyclonic Rift, targeting Cursed Totem. Vivi, Rhystic, and May trigger. Albin loses 2, Nick draws 1. Bowmaster triggers to ping Albin's animated land, killing it. Earthbend then triggers to return to the battlefield tapped. Vivi then gets a counter and deals 1 to each opponent. Cyclonic Rift then resolves and Cursed Totem bounces the hand. Albin activates Vivi for 4 blue mana. He finally casts his Praetor's Grasp card, Thassa's Oracle. Rhystic triggers and Albin pays. Thassa's Oracle enters and triggers, and Albin holds priority and casts Demonic Consultation. Vivi, Rhystic, and May trigger. Albin loses 2, then pays for Rhystic, and Vivi gets a counter and deals 1 to each opponent. In response, Nick casts Force of Will, paying a life and exiling Omnath as an additional cost, returning it to the command zone. May triggers and Nick loses 2. With that, Force counters Consultation, Thassa's Oracle's trigger then resolves, and Albin looks at the top 3 and keeps 1 on top. Albin goes to combat and swings Vivi at Nick. Nick takes the damage, and Albin passes the turn. Nick untaps and draws. He plays Wooded Foothills as land for turn. He casts a Gilded Drake. It enters and triggers to gain control of Vivi. Nick activates Vivi to get 5 blue mana. He spends some to cast Ranger Captain of Eos. It enters and triggers to search up a Mockingbird to hand. Nick casts Mockingbird with X equals 1. It enters as a copy of Orcish Bowmasters and triggers to ping John's Bowmaster, killing it. Without any other plays under May, Nick has to pass the turn, discarding a hand size. John untaps and draws. Albin offers to let Yuriko in as he thinks he has a better chance alone against Yuriko if he has Vivi back. John goes to combat and swings Yuriko at Albin. Albin takes the damage, and Yuriko triggers to reveal Hydroelectric Specimen, with each opponent taking 3, and Nick dies. Control of Vivi returns to Albin. In his second main phase, John casts Cursed Totem. May triggers to ping him for 2. John then passes the turn. Albin untaps and draws. His draw has brought him another turn of life. He casts the One Ring. Vivi and May trigger. Albin loses 2, then Vivi gets a counter and pings John for 1. The One Ring resolves and triggers to give Albin protection from everything. Living on a prayer, Albin passes the turn. John untaps and draws. He plays Hydroelectric Laboratory into play untapped, paying 3 life. He casts Roaming Throne, naming Ninja as it enters. Staring down protection, John passes the turn. In his end step, Albin taps the One Ring to draw a card. The turn then moves to Albin. Albin untaps, and in his upkeep, the One Ring deals 1 to him. He taps the One Ring to draw 2 cards. Not finding the out he needed and staring down certain death, Albin concedes. And with that, John wins the game. So, what did we learn today? Little pings might seem like nothing at first, but a random 45 damage can really make it seem important. If you have any tips for the video, leave them below. Subscribe if you feel like it. Until next time, keep making value plays. And I'll tap it for green, thanks to Yavi Maya, and I'll Utopia Sprawl City Brass, which is also a 4. This game's awesome!
What did I do to you?
I'll be honest, I don't think Dan can win through Deafening Silence.
Yeah, I really don't.
You're good.
I mean,
You're good. I don't want to get a bad comment.
No. Boo, Nick, L-play. I was typing it out already. Alright.
Yeah, I was like, it depends.
There
do
we
you
go.
want to do that?
I
Do you want to
it.
do that, or do you think there's a better one coming? That's my question.
What the fuck would be better?
Yeah.
I don't know.
You casted that?
Yeah, I'm gonna cast that.
Thoughts on One Ring?
I got nothing for One Ring. Do you have something?
I have nothing.
Oh yeah, fierce. Fuck you.
Okay. I was like, I for sure have nothing here. So.
I ain't letting that happen.
Alright.
Comes in tapped.
Yep, but I gain protection.
Oh, that's brutal that comes in tapped.
Not for me. Combat.
Oh,
Swing
Wait,
you.
hold on. How much?
That's 3. Damn, if I had the One Ring, I would be cooking right now. Or if you killed Derevi, I'd be fucking winning. No, but what does it do? How do I...
make.
Oh, you have Perforos.
I have Perforos. I make
Yeah, you
infinite
got it.
creatures.
Okay,
to
you're good. Yes, thank you.
2 for that.
Now that is good sequencing.
Oh, it's when a player does it.
Yes.
Attack with your undergrounds.
There's no like reading.
Why? Were you to block my 1/1?
Yeah.
It would go back into a land.
You would go back into a land, and then you're just giving me mana. What would...
That's helping you out.
You're not going to help me out.
You need it.
I'll go to combat.
Okay.
I'll attack you for 1.
I'll take one.
See, this is why I don't do this.
That's fucked up.
You know what? Fine.
I'll fucking do it.
You want to do that
He
to
won't.
me?
No, Dan, I don't. You're just someone with a blocker.
I don't think
Why don't you do that to him?
Because I've been blown to
Wouldn't that
bits.
make
I mean,
sense?
yeah, I'm already.
Also, because he can recast that. You fucking can't. You have a lot of incentive to not.
You're just trying to be an asshole.
No, I'm saying I won't use it on you. Look, you can let me in or not.
No, whatever.
You just say no, and then I'll kill you.
And I'll
That's
kill you.
crazy.
Yeah, fine, come in.
Alright.
You also have enough attackers.
Look, I don't know what you think my hand is, but it's not 5 fucking ninjas. I'm only gonna draw 1 fucking card,
Dude,
okay?
I don't know. I really don't. It's probably
Okay.
5 ninjas. Commandeer.
Trigger guy ones. 15. Hey, that was cool.
Holy.
You didn't take this with Praetor's Grass?
No. Go to combat.
I go to 1.
Okay. I will pass to you, Nick. You killing that land was the difference between me killing Nick.
Well, the difference maybe between you winning also.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
The One Ring.
Oh, yeah.
The One Ring's really bad right here.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it gives you protection. What do you mean?
I'm taking 2 to play it.
No, you don't lose this turn. How's that a bad trade? I'm not killing you.
I'll play One Ring.
Yeah, like you don't die.
I guess not dying is important.
Yeah. You take 2.
Yeah.
I can't stop it.
Alvin, if you didn't attack me, I had food chain.
Oh.
And I was at 1 life. I couldn't
Dude.
have food
What did
chain.
you? But you stopped whatever.